pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll look at for approval of today's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Pose the same. And also want to mention that Jill is remotely accessed out. Hi, Jill. All right. Number 3, study session. Discussion of activity fees. Dr. Funk.
Jennifer and Paul, you guys want to just come on, sit up here? So we have had Paul slide over. Paul has done a very nice job of bringing participation numbers to the district level so that we're aware of what our participation looks like in relation to other schools in southern Minnesota and in schools our size. And so, I think one of his goals and one of my goals as superintendent is really to take a look at what we can do to increase student activity. And, the Search Institute a number of years ago came out with some research and essentially said the more involved your kids are in different activities within the school system, the more likely they're going to be successful. And so, and if you're looking more recently at equity research, one of the big things when they're talking about with equity is elimination of barriers. And how can we reduce barriers to our kids having similar opportunities within our school system? And so we've just kind of batted around some ideas as far as offerings for our students from an extracurricular or co-curricular perspective. And Paul has done some limited research internally with our student athletes. And one of the questions that he asked them basically is, is the cost of participating in activities a barrier to participation? And though it's not a high number, I think it's a significant number. 25% of our students said it is, who took the survey, who answered that question. So, having thought through this a bit, I thought I would just bring it to the boards, throw it out to the board to have a discussion on, what are some things we can do to reduce or to eliminate the barriers to participation. And what the equity folks will tell you, those who study equity in schools, is the best way to do this is to have no participation fee whatsoever. Because what you're going to do, and we have free and reduced fees that we work with students on, but it's still a barrier. And they're still having to go through hoops to sign up, and they're less likely to sign up. So I'll just throw this out there as a concept, and I've got Jennifer sitting up here because I asked her and Paul to look at what the cost of something like this would be. But what if we went to a concept of if kids want to participate in activities in the Oberle area school system, they can do it at no cost. And we can provide you some information as far as what they have found on that. But and Paul's asked other people in southeastern Minnesota on the Big Nine. Nobody does this. We'd be the first district to do something like this. But again, I think this is consistent with a number of years ago. We were the first district to say we are not going to charge kids to come watch our sports, and now a number of districts in southern Minnesota are doing that as well. So it's kind of a progressive out there. There's a financial cost to it, which Jennifer can get into. But I just am curious to have the discussion with the board on what your thoughts on something like that would be, and we can kind of go from there with it.
Okay, Paul. I do have a couple questions. I don't know if you want questions to start off with, or do you want to just present? Do you have a PowerPoint or? Okay. Just, couple things I jotted down. I'm sure do you know average Big Nine fees for participation?
I don't have average numbers, but they're similar to where we're at. Our fee structure, like we've talked in prior meetings, is a little bit more complicated than other districts, but we're pretty close in fees.
We bring, last year, this year it's hard to tell because we don't have all of our seasons in, but last year we brought in just over $100,000 in fees. I think it was about 105. So would be, we would want to look at, okay, how can we potentially make up that revenue? The other side of it, which is more difficult to quantify, is the intended consequence, of course, is that more students participate. But what does that mean for the expenditure side? Does it mean hiring more coaches, more transportation, more equipment, more uniforms? And that's a more difficult number to come up with because we just don't know how many more students would sign up.
I would have a question, and maybe this is just athletics, I'm not sure, but if you look at participating, it starts at the young age when they're not even in school. And so is that also a barrier? Because it seems, thinking back, they start at a young age and they pay all the way through. So they must stop before that, I would assume.
I agree. When we met with our booster clubs earlier this year, one thing I asked is to try and start coming up with ways as clubs that they can eliminate some of those barriers as well. Different ways to have financial assistance available, reducing their fees, and fundraising externally rather than internally. So avoid asking parents to directly cut a check or even indirectly asking families to do that. A lot of times you see some of the fundraisers where parents would rather cut the check than have their kid go door to door, or the burden of selling certain items. So we spoke to our booster clubs around that same concern, asking them to have some goals about making less barriers, certainly too, for their programs. But that's where we lose a little control. As a district, we can't control what the clubs are doing in the youth association.
When you mentioned transportation too, I know that the two hurdles I've heard besides the cost is transportation. We still got to get the kids home afterwards.
Right.
Get them to the activity. And number two, the online sign up, which isn't necessarily a favorite of everyone. But I'm not talking just older people. So some may not have the access to do it. I know there's probably not a lot of fees with that. I mean, it might be as simple as putting a table up a couple
Right.
things. I mean, but, that was a couple things I wondered if you guys discussed or come up with boosters.
So I've met with our school social workers and sent emails to start getting meetings set up with other support staff for our students. One is translating documents, registration information, and another piece is having another option for registration available, be paper, pencil, or some other process for students to, or just maybe having a staff member willing to sit down with families and help them through the process too. So yeah, we're looking at those hurdles. I think the bigger discussion and something that's probably not as realistic as the transportation piece. We've looked into some of those expenses, and I don't think we're ready for that at this point too. So.
Well, I think eliminating any barriers that we can is great. So I would be a little bit curious to hear a little bit more about the financing and how that will look for us. But I think it's a great idea. I would like to further on look at the transportation thing too. But only one thing at a time we can do. But I think it's great, and it'd be great to try it and see what happens. This can be huge. This can make a big difference in a lot of kids' lives. I know a friend, and they have 4 children, and they do okay, but it is a burden. It is a burden for very active kids. And okay, now one more activity, I don't know, right? So even on families that aren't struggling so much financially, it still is a little bit of a burden. So I think this is a great idea.
I'm pretty excited about this. for a number of reasons. The last time I looked, I don't think any students have an activity fee for their geometry class.
I agree, Neil. Right?
And if our co-curricular activities are an extension of an educational program, then it seems to me sort of illogical that students would be expected to pay in order to participate in those programs. I don't think transportation is if we have an avalanche of students, an increase of students participating because of no fee. Transportation is sort of a fixed cost. I suppose it's possible you might have to get a bigger bus, but that's not a huge difference. Finally, I brought this up at the Education Foundation, last Education Foundation meeting, and for that too. And the foundation will do everything it can to assist the district in meeting this obligation and making it a little less of a financial impact on the district. And one other thing, we've entered into a pretty good investment, I think, in improving our facilities. A couple of years ago it started, and that's pretty much in place now, and demonstrates our support of co-curricular activities. And I think this move would be completely consistent with that and indicate that we are really serious about supporting our co-curricular activities.
I would just add to Neil's comment on the Education Foundation. I know that the class of '69, I believe, raised about $80,000 strictly for these type of activities, and I know there's been previous donors, Dr. Pickering and several others. So I think further discussions with the Education Foundation would be prudent.
Yeah, I think we've started to have conversations at that table about fundraising and the support we can give the district. So I think there's definitely some momentum there. I also, and I don't want this to sound as like a negative comment, but as someone who's been on a booster club and know that sometimes we come up, we're and I use this word very lightly, but we subsidize some of the expenses. I mean, we provide things to students that have those barriers already. Booster clubs do. So I would hope that there's some processes in place that we would identify that we were, and you've done a great job of already starting to work with the boosters in communication. And I would just hate for some of the maybe the less supported booster clubs to feel a bigger burden because now there might be additional, and there may not be, but just to be saying that out loud and be conscious of that. And I, for the record, think this is just an awesome idea. And I think I can think back into youth sports when students needed a ride to when there wasn't transportation, where parents had to do that together. They didn't have money for meals, that kind of stuff. And the community of the youth teams just kind of came together and made that happen. And this is a great representation of that. And I agree with Neil, we invested and we asked the community to support us, and this is just a good way to answer that.
Just a couple thoughts on supporting this. We have a number, and I don't have John here with any of the numbers tonight, but we have a number of groups that are advertising in the district, and we've got the sign at Hammerfield. Mayo gave us $25,000. There are going to be some more signage out on the softball and baseball fields, and those are ongoing for 5 years. So that support is going to be ongoing moving forward. So, we could definitely tap into some of that to support the programming. The other thing that I just keep on, and I don't know who shared this with me, but somebody shared this concept with me. There's Play It Again Sports used to be a big sports store that existed, and I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but, you know, we have a lot of, I mean, I got a garage full of stuff from when my kids were in hockey and et cetera, in sports. We have a lot of kids who've moved on in this community who still have a lot of equipment, I think, at home. And, you know, we could have kind of like we do with the student store for some of our kids who need extra things. We could have a store for Play It Again sports for students, to help defray the cost of equipping our kids. So that's another piece of it that we could utilize as far as, you know, cost savings for individuals within the community. So I guess what I'm looking for from the board tonight is just some guidance for green light planning this, and we can really sit down and develop a concept, and we can talk to you about how we think we'll be able to support this thing financially moving forward. And I mean, I'm hearing there's some interest from the board.
I think we definitely have interest. There's no doubt about it.
Exciting thing if we could set that precedent from where we've been, even, you know, maybe we even go as far as a athletic garage sale or academic or, you know, whatever the activity is. I mean, there's probably dance things that I think can be repurposed, like you mentioned. Maybe there's a one-time booster fee per season. I think it's something that if we develop some problems by having too many kids out there, I think that's something we could deal with pretty easily. I think that's what we want. So, great idea.
I could just speak to the last barrier that Dr. Funk brought up of the equipment needs. And in the same survey that we gathered, the 25% about students struggling with to pay the fee, 40% of the kids have responded saying that equipment demands are hard to keep up with as well, because a lot of that cost falls directly on the families. And so I think the idea of eliminating that barrier the best we can and trying to help ease the pain there would be beneficial. So.
I also like your approach of talking to the booster clubs and asking them to find ways to reduce the cost, because I know a lot of them buy clothing excessive of what's probably needed. And I mean, it's one of those nice to have things, but if it's another cost that's preventing students from participating, I think you need to continue those talks with the booster groups to look at everything they do very, very closely.
And we're certainly asking a lot from our booster clubs. I'm fully aware of that. I also want to try and work with clubs and not putting expenses in their hands, that something that we can handle from the school side of things too. So just trying to work closely and you know, listen if there's concerns like that, and that's where we're going. So.
I just had one more question. Do you have good correlation between student productivity and, I mean, I'm probably answering the question that I'm asking, but students that are in athletics or other activities, their productivity and their attendance, those kind of things in the classroom and attendance in school, do you see a good correlation there?
So we haven't dug deep enough in our numbers internally, but the research is very strong behind it supports it. We've pulled a number of different articles, and the research is there to support it, yes.
And I might add, Kim, I know Paul pretty well, and it's high on his list of priorities to make our co-curricular activities educational and to promote, you know, not just being a good athlete, but being a good student and good citizen, good everything.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, number 4, we'll be entering into a closed session now pursuant to the Minnesota statute, section 13D.03, labor negotiations. Need a vote on that. We got 'em. Any seconds?
Second.
Got a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, the same.
Jill, I'll text you when we're done.
Okay, we're back into open session. Got a couple action items under numeral 5.1, approval of the Elderly Education Association 2019-2021 Master Agreement. Look.
Move to approve.
Got approval, a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion passes. And 5.2, we got an approval memorandum of understanding with the Elderly Education Association. Looking for a motion on that? Oh,
Did
you
you want to?
do you have to go through that?
Just clarity on it, that's just the key
Oh,
comp
I got
agreement.
that. Sorry, I looked at the wrong one.
Yeah, that's the ATPPS agreement,
Yep,
it's what we
okay.
do annually for the MOU.
So there are literally no changes in there except for Mary Jo's title. Other than that, that's the salary schedule, pay scale that comes out of the master agreement. So, other than that, there are no changes.
What does Mary Jo's title become?
Executive Director of Teaching and Learning.
And it is what right now?
Her title last year was,
That was still that,
Yes.
that's,
yes, the document. Yes,
okay, didn't
those are the only changes.
know if it changed, okay. Any questions on that? Okay, guess I'd look for a motion for approval for that. Move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion a second, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose the same. Okay, next meeting will be a business meeting, March 16th, 5 PM here in the boardroom. Meeting's adjourned.